And we couldn't think of two people who would have, who would put fire in the feet of Charlotte Bunch. I hope she's ready. I'm sure she's saying, bring it on. So I will just hand it over to Hayat, and Hayat will be moderating it. And at the same time, she's a participant. So it's a new way of doing it. We wanted to make sure that they have all the time that they need, because moderators take too much time sometimes. Hayat, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First, thank you, Hibak, for always the great introductions and inspiring ones, and also for believing in the voices of young women, equally as you believe in the voices of the icons like Charlotte. And I'm very happy to be with you today. I would like to start by saying, what does the 16 days mean to me, and what does it mean to be in a conference convening these amazing people, supporters for the feminist movement and hardcore feminists from the region, because our activism, as you already know, is a daily struggle and fight which we pursue always with power and hope. The 16 days of activism is an occasion during which women and feminists from around the world and also in our region try to unite, to raise the awareness about gender-based violence, also and challenge the attitudes and the discriminatory traditions, and in addition to calling for improvements of services and laws to end the violence against women. So far from this, for us also the 16 days of activism is an opportunity to discuss more, to come together and to try to find, to build on the past and to put future, if I can say, plans and agendas. I am happy to join this intergenerational dialogue with an amazing role model, Charlotte Bunch, and also a loud and hardcore feminist and friend, Amani. And we will be discussing during this dialogue the pressing issues and the problems. Also, we'll be celebrating the achievements, among which is the 16 days of activism, and building on them to propose kind of recommendations to ensure more impact in our work. So first, I would like to make use of the great opportunity Hibak mentioned of having Charlotte here with us as one of the founders of the 16 Days of Activism, which marks its 30th anniversary in 2021. I would like to hear from you first, Charlotte, about the story and the history behind the 16 days, about the tools that pioneer feminist fighters used to make this milestone possible for our generation. The floor is yours, Charlotte.
Thank you, Hayat, and thank you, Hibak. It's really a great pleasure to be here. Karama is a special place in my heart, and I'm really happy to see many of your faces. I would like to start by saying that the 16 Days of Activism grew out of a meeting just like the ones that you have in Karama all the time. It was a group of women, mostly young women, at a Women's Global Leadership Institute that we started at Rutgers University at the Center for Women's Global Leadership in 1991. It was 25 women from all over the world, including women from Africa, Asia. A woman from Palestine was present, a woman from many parts of the world. And we were trying to find some way, we were in small working groups trying to find some way to link the issue of violence against women to human rights. And we had been saying for several years that the important thing is that people see that violence against women is a fundamental violation of the human rights of women. And at that time, it's hard to believe today, the UN and mainstream human rights groups did not recognize violence against women as a human rights issue. They thought it was a crime and a bad thing, but it wasn't understood as a violation of your fundamental human dignity and human rights. And so we talked about how to make strategy for this to happen. And someone said, well, you know, in Latin America, women had declared November 25th as the International Day Against Violence Against Women, which came from the Latin American regional meeting. So again, it came from the Latin American women at the local level. and it's November 25th, and there's 16 days between that and Human Rights Day. Why don't we call for 16 days of focus on violence against women? And our first theme was violence against women violates human rights. And it really was, I think the issue of violence against women is the most grassroots issue that women have brought to the global agenda. If you look at even the Women's Convention and all the early human rights documents, there is no mention of violence against women because it was not seen as a global issue. It was not even seen as an important issue. And so the 16 days was a central part of grassroots women, women from everywhere around the world, trying to put violence against women onto the global agenda. We were specifically focusing on the World Conference on Human Rights coming in Vienna in 1993. So the first action of the 16 days in 1991 was a petition to the UN World Conference to be held in Vienna 2 years later, saying violence against women must be on the agenda, as must be all the human rights issues that specifically affect women. And that petition was eventually circulated, and over 500,000 women around the world, some with fingerprints, some with names, some with all kinds of signatures, signed on to this petition. And it was all motivated and generated by women at the local level. And I think the thing I want to say most about this issue is that it comes from women's lives. It did not come from a UN document. It did not come from national governments. We are very happy that the UN and national governments often now recognize the 16 days of activism, but it came from women. It came from women in every region and every country who said, this is the biggest obstacle to the realization of our rights as human beings. And it was initiated by local and regional women's groups, Women in Law and Development Africa, Women Living Under Muslim Laws, other groups that existed in 1991 that were initiating local activity. And the final thing I would say is that the 16 days has always been about global solidarity, but local action. It is up to women at every country and in every city and every place in the world to determine what aspect of violence against women they want to highlight. What is the issue that most affects them at any given time? So the global networking is to strengthen the local action. And to me, that's sort of at the heart of the women's movement, at the heart of a feminist revolution, if you will, is that we have global solidarity, but we have local action. And we start from the differences amongst us lead us to see what we have in common, not to cover up difference, but to go from our differences to what it is that we have in common. So to me, this is one of the great successes of local activists organizing the 16 days. But of course, the challenge, which we'll continue with discussing, is that we have not eradicated or even lessened violence against women to the extent that we thought we could in 30 years. So the challenge remains, how do we actually eliminate violence against women? Thank you, Hayat.
Thank you, Charlotte. Well, I think that it is inspiring the statement that you mentioned that women is a grassroots issue, that feminists succeeded to bring it to the global agenda. I think that, and I will hear from Amani now, I think that Amani agrees with me that although we were able to push, or feminists before us were able to push the violence against women agenda to the global level, but we still have our own struggles on the local level. We are really fed up of being always obliged to explain why challenging violence against women matters in our country. Lately, amid all the hardships on different levels the globe is experiencing after the outbreak of COVID-19, and also in specific, the accumulating crisis we are seeing in our region, for example, in Lebanon, adding to this global crisis, we had a very harsh economic crisis. It's the worst in Lebanon's modern history. We had an explosion in in the capital of Lebanon, Beirut. Also, I know Amani and the situation in Palestine is deteriorating day after day, and maybe Amani can talk a lot about it. So beside also the continuous backlash, the feminist movement and the shrinking spaces activism, which also I would like to hear from you later, Charlotte, about it. So I think it is now more critical and needed to raise the voice more and emphasize more and again that violence against women matters and matters and matters. So I would love to hear from you, Amani, your reflections on this and your analysis of the current problems and situation when speaking about violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Hayat. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Karama, for this amazing gathering and convening that emphasized the demands and the priorities of women. Actually, the 16 days campaign is also 365 days campaign that women have been doing for 30 years. But these 16 days, for me in specific, are very important also to emphasize on our priorities, our issues, our demands, our challenges that we are advocating throughout the year, not only for these 16 days. So unfortunately, after 30 years, we're still demanding our basic human rights. We're still demanding the space that we have right to. That we're still demanding our right to movement, our right to life. In the launching of. And I can see also my friend Nahed Utaima here. Great to see you from Palestine. In the launching of this campaign, the 16 days to combat violence against women, we heard about many femicide cases for women, the young women with children who were killed by their husbands in front of their children. I don't know if this is a coincidence, but it is for sure, it is an alarm that to different actors and different stakeholders that what we have been doing is not enough. We really need a radical change. We really need to reassess our approaches, because the backlash is increasing and it's really more severe now than ever. With the intersectionalities, with the conflict, with the occupation, with the crisis, as you mentioned, Hayat, it's really important. The economic crisis in specific, it's really it hits women the most, because according to the cultural values, according to patriarchal structures, women are experiencing domestic violence because of the economic crisis, and because and I hate it when I hear it as an excuse whether from men or some women who should believe in their rights, who should deny any form of violence for any reason, because it should be a zero tolerance to gender-based violence and violence against women. That when men experience violence by perpetrators, let's say, for example, by Israeli soldier or by any other perpetrators, they reflect this violence on women. But of course, this should not be even considered as an excuse or just an explanation, because there should not be an explanation, and we do not have to explain ourselves and explain why do we have to reduce gender-based violence and eliminate gender-based violence, because it's obvious and everyone understands. We were discussing the need for passing the family protection bill, and I heard someone from the government saying that, yeah, we have been considering this bill for 17 years. Then I asked, like, how many years do we still need, and how many women they should be killed for you to wake up and to realize that this is really a serious problem that is affecting not only women, it's affecting children, it's affecting families, it's affecting the coherence and the society itself. So when we talk about violence against women, it's not only an exclusive issue to women, but it is everyone's issue. And I think it has something to do with politics as well. When we talk about legal framework, why there's no protective legal framework for women especially in the MENA region. And I'm here, I can emphasize on the situation in Palestine, where we really need this legal framework also that would be able also to change social attitudes, would change also cultural values that reinforce violence against women, perceiving them as the weakest population, as followers and dependents on men. I think this is a prerequisite, and I am against the idea that legal framework comes the last. No, we really need something to refer to. We really need to provide women with a protection. And of course, when it comes to women's issues, when we hear about women killed or experiencing violence, we can see campaigns on social media. We can see activists, of course, raising their voices, but we do not see women, like people going on the streets, taking the streets. But at the same time, when a man is killed, we can see tribes, we can see like demonstrations on the streets, taking the streets because this man was killed, and demanding the right and demanding access to justice. It's not the case for women, but at the same time, definitely the solidarity movement, the global solidarity movement, as Charlotte mentioned, it's really important to put more pressure on stakeholders and policymakers and decision makers to take an action. It's not enough that they recognize the 16 days campaign. It's time for them to take an action, to take effective action, to prove that they really consider this and they really recognize also the efforts that the women's movement has been doing for 30 years, for more than 30 years now.
Yeah, thank you, Amani. So yes, I want actually, Amani, you inspired me mainly to when you mentioned the economic.
Yeah,
no
please
worries,
go ahead,
Amani.
Hayat.
Yes, so I was thinking that when you mentioned the economic situation, you inspired me to mention one of the main points that we are really discussing currently in Lebanon, that unfortunately the feminist movement is obliged to go back to the humanitarian support and service delivery instead of focusing on advocacy work because of this economic crisis. And I can give one example. One of the issues that arise in Lebanon recently is the period poverty issue, which is something that we never thought that we will experience during these days. So now in Lebanon, more than 70% of women and girls don't have the full access to the sanitary pads and everything related to their sexual and reproductive health, because unfortunately, under the excuse of the current pressing situation, and I think this is valid to different countries, usually the political leaders consider women's issues and violence against women and women's rights as a non-priority issue. So for example, in Lebanon, when they decided to, they formed a basket of subsidized items, they supported more than 300 items, including, for example, the razors, and for some reason they forgot the pads for women. So I think this is a really live example on the importance of having women's voices and participation on the first place on the political level, and also to speak more about how the crisis comes or disadvantages all the progress in our agenda. And here, Charlotte, I want to get back to you because Amani mentioned a very good point about that we need to have a radical change. So one of the main dilemmas that we as young feminists are always concerned about is that why, despite all the achievements, all the historical activism and work, the movement building on the national, regional, and the global level, which feminists like you have led, why does the gender gap still persist? Why weren't we able to succeed to lessen, as you mentioned also in your intervention, the violence against women? So I want to hear from your opinion, what have the feminist movement done well and what's still missing? How can we do this change, which Amani called a radical change? So if there are any tools or any ideas in mind.
Great. Well, actually, I'm really glad that Amani brought this up. And I think that we who have worked on this for many years, really, we depend on younger women to bring the new radical energy. I was a young woman once. I was the new radical energy, and I know how important that is. I mean, for example, in Latin America, there is a whole street movement around violence against women today called Ni Una Menos, not one more, not one more victim. And they're probably you've seen on YouTube or on the internet, they're women challenging every time a rape is made public. Thousands of women and some men are out in the streets. Exactly what you said, Amani. We have to get people out on the streets when there is a major rape, when there is a case that we can dramatize and say, not one more. And bring that radical energy. I completely agree with you. I do want to add that I think the perspective that it's important to have right now is that we are having a backlash against feminist success. The success we have had in putting this agenda at the front of the minds of at least some people and governments and the UN, there is now a very strong backlash of people who do not want us to succeed. And I think that that is part of what you are talking about, Amani, which is when we first started this movement, I think everyone thought, oh, well, of course, violence is a bad thing. But I don't think they were thinking politically. And I do believe that violence is always intersecting with politics. It is the political mechanism for keeping women dominated, for keeping women in their place, so to speak, in all our cultures, whether that place is the sexual property of any given person, family, that's why we have fathers, brothers, as well as lovers and husbands who are committing violence, because women are still seen in many ways everywhere. We have what I call honor killings in the United States, when we have brothers and fathers who try to determine what the sexual activity of their girls should be. I mean, the notion that we are still property is very deep. It's not eradicated in a short amount of time. And of course, with that is the notion for each individual man that the woman is his property. So in the United States, the most frequent domestic violence killings are femicide. And this year we are focusing the 16 days on femicide, is exactly that. It is men who feel that the woman, their woman, whether it's a wife or a girlfriend, has done something, often something sexual, but it could also just be anything that they don't approve of. So we're really clear that this is a political cultural issue. Culture isn't just neutral. Culture is also reinforcing political power. So one of the campaigns that I really like that came from the Women Living Under Muslim Laws Network is a campaign that simply declares every year, 365 days exactly, violence is not our culture. Quite simply, violence is not our culture. Because we're always being told that violence against women is the cultural practice of this group or that group or the other group. But it is the cultural practice of all of our societies. Look at the US media. Talk about violence against women. It's a cultural practice of our media. Violence is very embedded in the United States. So, I don't believe that it's somebody else's culture. I think it's all of our cultures that have the remnants of the patriarchal attitude that women must be controlled by men, and that violence is always in every group, whether it's a racial group or an ethnic group or a smaller sect, whatever, violence is always the means of control over people when they don't behave in the way that the dominant group believes they should. So this is all political, absolutely. And of course, it intersects with other political issues. So race and sex, or ethnic group and sex, all of these things intersect. And colonialism, I mean, I know you have that in relation to Palestinian women. We see it in many other situations as well. Indigenous women, where violence intersects with the control of the dominant group. So I think we must always remember it is political. Even in the personal sense, it is usually still embedded in that notion of control of women. So I think the backlash we now see is precisely because we have begun to erode that belief that patriarchal is inevitable and the only way, and that women are property. We haven't eliminated it, but it has eroded. And of course, there are forces that are fighting back against that. One of the important forces is, of course, men and boys who are also starting to join the fight against violence against women. And I think that is what you were saying, Amani, that gender-based violence affects everyone. I have met many young men who are against gender-based violence because they watched their fathers beat their mothers and felt they could do nothing about it. And they are now committed to trying to create a world where that doesn't happen to the next generations. So it does affect everyone. Men also have a stake. I personally believe, and the research is beginning to show this, that wars and major ethnic conflicts are always made worse where violence against women is accepted in the home. That when we accept domestic violence at the heart of our lives, we are laying the conditions for accepting violence as a solution to all political conflicts. And so I think racist violence, cultural domination are all connected. It's not that they're the same thing, there are different dimensions, but as we know with intersectionality, different dimensions are still rooted in some of the same political dynamics of control. So we have to take the particulars, but also see the commonality of the controlling patriarchal ideology. So I think we are making progress. I think you do get backlash as we see today, and it's very difficult, and the COVID epidemic has made it worse. It's made it worse in many dimensions. But I also see young women like you, like others all over the world. I teach, the best thing I do is I teach 18, 19, 20-year-old young women who are bursting at the seams to change this system. So I do think that we have to always have a radical front of people who are out there in society saying, we have to change this. And it is all of the above. It's not laws only, it's not culture only, it's all of it. Each of us can work on whatever part we can do best, but it's the interface of the laws with the culture. You don't change one without changing the other. It's all comes together. So in that sense, I think I would encourage many different strategies, and certainly 365 days of the year, but let's keep using the 16 days to highlight what it is that we're doing and fighting 365 days a year. And femicide, of course, is the most extreme form of violence because the women are no longer alive to even fight this struggle. So please keep leading us. Young women must also lead.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Well, I totally agree on the point that we were able to erode this belief that gender-based violence and violence against women should be a priority. And for me, I totally agree on the point that we are making influence because now the whole system that we are fighting is feeling that feminists were able to organize and to make some impact. This will cause more backlash, but I'm certain that we will be able to face it in the best ways possible. And for me, I believe that all these advancements are because of the movement building and mainly the grassroots movement building. And as a young feminist, I always say that I'm always grateful for the fearless efforts of the old generation of feminists who paved the way to me and to many others to stand where we are today with more knowledge, power, a lot of achievements. But also, and here I would like to hear from Amani, I consider that there is a lot to be done to ensure constructive intergenerational exchange, dialogue, solidarity, and inclusion. I believe that this movement can't without the voices and efforts of different generations. And that's why I would like to hear, Amani, your view in relation to the young feminist movement nowadays. What's the difference that it is bringing to the feminist movement as a whole, and how are we building on the past?
Yes, thank you, Hayat, and thank you very much, Charlotte. What you mentioned really, it even touched my heart. Like even being a feminist, I'm sure if anyone hears what you're saying, even if they are far away from the feminist values, of course they will be influenced, and this is exactly what we need. Talking about the generational dialogue, it would have been impossible to even start the young feminist movement, which I hate to separate from the feminist movement. There should not be two separate feminist movement, because it's all one movement, and even it's going global movement, sharing commonalities, challenges, priorities, and also elevating the voices of women, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their localities. Now women come together from everywhere, from different backgrounds, also elevating each other's voices, like giving strength to each other, not empowering, but sharing the power with each other, because they believe that they are partners in this. So young women wouldn't be able to build anything, or to create a movement, or to start a movement without the achievements, the wisdom and experience of the wider generation. And at the same time, mentors like Charlotte, like Hibak, like Lily, like all of you who are here, it is really important to also to guide the efforts and to organize the efforts of the younger movement, because sometimes this is exactly what is lacked. Sometimes we lack the coordination, maybe because of the enthusiasm we have, because of the anger also we have, because it's getting more difficult for younger generations to tackle all of these issues together, because issues are increasing and violence is exacerbating. Economic, social, political situation are really deteriorating. So it's even getting harder for young generation to confront all of these anti-feminism movement, even extremist groups. But combining the experience, combining the achievements with with this enthusiasm, with this passion, and this innovation that we mentioned, this is all what makes the strong feminist movement. And also going out of the silos, because we don't want to keep talking to ourselves. We all understand what feminism means. We all understand what issues we have, what issues other women have, but we also want other groups who are not even part of this movement to learn about the reality of women, to learn about the situation and the implications, even for people. This is advocacy. When we talk about the advocacy, and of course, I'm not teaching you, I'm just sharing my ideas with you. When we talk about advocacy, it's not about talking to like-minded. It's about trying to have people who are feminism to be either neutral, not harming also the feminist movement, not pulling them back, or to get them as allies, as part of this. And when we talk about engaging men and boys, this is exactly what meant, because we are not perceiving men as enemies. We are not against the social values. We are not against religions. We are against violence. And what you mentioned, Charlotte, it is really important. It should be the hashtag of the 365 days. Violence is not part of our culture, because this was just created for political reasons, for reasons linked to keeping the dominance of specific group over another group, only because women are perceived to be weaker, but they are not, in fact. It has also something to do with teaching the younger generation, even by us. Like I have two boys, but I was so proud when I heard my son telling me the story that he challenged his teacher when he heard her speaking something against women, because he believes that women are equal to men. They should be treated the same. Women are not weak. He told her, my mom does everything. We don't have a man who help her. We help her. So building, like raising the generations, the younger generations up to these values, it's really important, because the young generation is not the future. They are the present of this movement. But we have the younger generation who are becoming like, who are being raised in schools in academic curricula that is all about stereotype, gender stereotype, division of roles, putting women only in the household sphere, not even exposing them to models, to role models of women who spoke up, who went out of the circle that was drawn for them. No, they are presidents, women are prime ministers, women are decision makers, and women are not waiting for others to defend their rights. They are defending their rights, and they are bringing their seats to the tables of decision making. And that's why the political violence, it's really important to emphasize on political violence during these campaigns, because this is why we still don't have enough legal reforms. We do not have even existing laws in some contexts that protect women. We do not have punishment procedures for perpetrators, and this is why any man could think of killing his wife or his sister without thinking even of the implications, because of course they would okay.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Amani. What you've said is really inspiring. I
شكرا أماني ما قلت.
comment on the point of the culture. Yes, I like the slogan that our culture is against violence, but I also do believe that the traditions and the culture and the system reproduce violence against women every day through the norms, through the practices, through the laws, through everything. I see people are enthusiastic to ask questions. We will open the floor for questions, but I want to hear finally from you, Charlotte, that when speaking about the engagement of, for example, men, the engagement of religious leaders, about as tools, if I can say, to maybe expand the work and expand the movement outside the bubbles. Do you see that it would be easy? Because for me, as an activist who's working daily on ground, I can see that it is really challenging, and I would really like to hear from your experience about the best tools to tackle this, especially that at certain occasions, unfortunately, while focusing on tools like engaging men and religious leaders and political leaders and etc., we are forgetting that we have to keep women as the core of the cause and the core of the struggle. So I would like to hear your reflections on this, Charlotte, and then Nina, Lily, and all. I will give you the floor for questions. Maybe if you can type the questions in the chat box, it would be easier.
Okay, let
because
me just.
Hayat is alarming me regarding the time.
Yeah, time, exactly. Okay, just a quick response. Of course, it's not easy. I think we begin to reach more people through their own personal experiences of violence. And I think that with both men as well as women, you see the change come when they think about how violence has affected their own lives and their own families. And usually that comes through thinking about their mothers or their aunts or their someone who has experienced violence. But I agree with you that as we do that, we need to not reproduce the patriarchal power that they are the ones who will, in a patronizing way, take care of the problem. We need to really center it on a solidarity with women who are leading this issue, so that we want men and religious leaders to speak, because this is not at the core of any of our religions. If you read the religions and the ideals of all of our religions, they're not about violence and domination of women. It is the cultural practice of patriarchy in the time that our religions were born, and that reproduces the dominance of patriarchy in many of the practices of the religion, but it's not at the core of any of the ideals and values of our religion. So I think that that's to try to go, I mean, not to be fundamentalist, but to go to the fundamentals of not the cultural practices around religion, but the values. And those values are never about violence or violation of other people. They are always values about peace and love. And so we need to reinterpret them outside of the moment in history that they were developed, which is, of course, certainly in terms of the monotheistic religions, patriarchal moments. That's when they grew. There are many more things I could say, but I want to have time for the questions.
Yes.
So let's take the questions.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. So I will give the floor to Lily and then to Nina. We will take only these two questions because of time restrictions. And I appreciate if we can stick to 1 minute, please. The floor is yours, Lily.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate what you said, Charlotte, Hayat, and Amani. I'm proud of the young women in Karama. They're very and they know what they're talking about. They're brave souls, actually. But I think throughout we've ignored, or I feel that it should have been very important to point out that religious radicalization in certain parts of the world also contributed to violence against women. And I can go back to what had happened in religious radicalization that was used in a political sense in Bosnia. What happened in Bosnia? What happened in Iraq also, and what happens elsewhere. Okay, I think that we should not ignore also what's happening, for example, in Afghanistan right now. So I think this is an element that we should also be aware of, because these radical religious groups mushroom all of a sudden. They don't have, I agree with Charlotte that no one religion encourages violence against women. It's true, because religions just talk about forgiveness, about equality between people and so forth. But I think radicalization is radicalization of political movements that are using religion is something that we should note, underline, because I think it's going to continue. And whether we talk or do not talk to the religious clerks here and there, we find that they promote peace. They promote what there's in the Quran, in the Bible, and so on. So please, we have to underline the radicalization of religion in our area and other areas. And we can see it. I was in the States 3 weeks ago, and I could see in the Southern Belt, okay, where people are where men are very macho like, and I saw someone slap his wife or girlfriend in the street, all right? So please, we have to talk about it. We shouldn't ignore it, because in Palestine, religious radicalization is a problem, actually, in approving the family law. We know it for a fact. So I hope that you pay attention to this, young ladies.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's really inspiring. And I think that you pointed out a very important point, yeah, that we have to keep in mind always. Charlotte and Amani, I will take from Nina and then Shadia 1 minute each, please. And then I will give you the floor for final comments, okay? Wait a minute, we still have 1 minute for the session. Or 1 minute for each question.
No, that's, you're putting me on the spot. No, for each question and answer, so that we can go back to
okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for putting
so
me on
I will take from Nina and then Shadia 1 minute each, please, and then we will go to the closing remarks. Thank you. Nina.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. It's always inspiring to see the intergenerational dialogue for veterans like Charlotte, and then Amani and Hayat and others from the ground. It's really amazing. I wanted to focus on Amani's appeal for trying to foster some discussion on tools. You know, I'm sure Ms. Bahous, when she speaks, will talk about UN Women's new report on increase of gender-based violence in the time of COVID. But one of the facts it underscores is that 70% of it occurs in conflict-affected countries, which is my world over the last 3.5 decades. So I wanted to raise for some feedback 3 tools, because I think about looking forward in concrete ways to maybe gain further attention. One, you know, I read with a fine-tooth comb, the Secretary General every year for 1325 anniversary submits an annual report. And you'll see that once again, there's very little information on gender-based violence. That's number one. Number two, the SG, every conflict area where there's a peacekeeping mission, between the peacekeeping missions and the special political missions, it's over 20 now, annual reports, periodic reports, sometimes 3 a year. So my that one suggestion there, as with the annual report, because the Security Council has embraced the idea for increased regular reporting on the situation of women, there be an appeal that both for the annual report on 1325 and for the yearly reports, sometimes multiple per year, for each of the peacekeeping missions and special political missions, there be obligatory reporting in the context of those reports. Why is that important? Because those reports feed what the council, how the council acts, whether it be in resolutions, presidential statements, etc. And then finally, I wanted to even raise the idea on Amani's idea or someone's idea, I think Hayat, on engaging political leadership. There was an amazing overturn in East Timor, where the political landscape is very fractured and continues to be, where they got the prime minister, the president, and the head of the opposition, there was a men in black campaign, to make you know, very public statements on a regular basis to engage men in the campaign. And one might contemplate, could you do this on a broader basis? For instance, you know, there's a group of fragile and conflict affected countries called the G7 plus, 20 countries. I work regularly with them. And you could contemplate appealing to the Secretary General and partnering with Karama to sort of launch such an initiative, or even the League of Arab States. The president of the General Assembly made a big deal on this violence against women. And so it's going beyond the council to the GA. But one thing I'd like to caution, because I know Karama is a partner of the Generation Equality Forum, they're touting that much of the 40 billion pledge, there is an action coalition group on violence against women will go toward this. But there's been several critical articles in the last couple of weeks that this is a vague commitment and there's not a whole lot of new money. And moreover, that compact is not obligatory, it's discretionary. So that's why I'm focusing on the Secretary General's reports, which color what the action taken by the council, and also on thinking of partnerships where you get the leadership like Timor did. And it was incredibly effective, particularly in areas where rural people don't always have access to reading and read these things, that it's public statements and garnering from the local level support. And they worship some of these leaders. So thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for bringing this perspective to that. If we can end up the discussion with final remarks, Charlotte.
Yes, well, I think the last 2 questions really go to the next session with the Executive Director of UN Women. But let me just say, particularly about the first question, absolutely, the political use of religion is what we are talking about. And that's why I talked about the slogan, violence is not our culture, is an assertion that women also have the right to say what our culture should be. It's of course not saying that violence is not embedded in our culture, it clearly is, but violence is not the culture that we all want to affirm, and we have a voice. We women have every right to define the changes we want in our cultures everywhere. Finally, I would just end by saying that absolutely. You know, for some years, we have said there are two things that governments and UN level must do if they're serious about this issue. One is to exert political will, which I think goes with Nina's point about political leadership, that there must be high level leadership on this issue in relation to every possible situation. And the second is to provide serious resources. And we are beginning to see more resources, but we are not seeing anywhere near the resources that are necessary to show that we consider this a fundamental question. So these are questions for the future. And I think that if we can voice continually what political will and provision of adequate resources means in each different situation, that is at the core of the steps we need to take, whether that's with 1325 in conflict situations or domestic legislation in some situations. I believe that we are seeing the beginning of the end of acceptance of violence against women. But, you know, I just want to say nothing changes overnight, least of all culture. But the amount of cultural change, if you look back 100 years, or you even look back my 50 of my years, the amount of cultural change around gender and women and race that I have seen in my lifetime is astounding. So I do believe that we are on the right track, or as Martin Luther King would say, the arc bends toward justice, but it's not a fast-paced arc. So we have to all keep pushing our part of that. And I think Karama is in the right place at the right time to facilitate that in this region and also globally. And I'm really excited. And next time Hibak will have to give us 2 hours, Hayat and Amani. Okay? I love
Thank you,
Thank
Charlotte.
Right.
Amani?
Okay, thank you. I think I have to be very short in commenting, but I just want to reiterate what Dr. Lili mentioned about the use of religious interpretation for the interest of specific political groups, of course, eventually to exclude women and to also to use this as an excuse for them to keep women away from the decision-making table. And this is, of course, of their interest, because the whole dynamic will change when women when women have equal access to decision making. If women are having the same opportunity in decision making, the same number of seats at the table, everything will be changed. Definitely, everything will be changed, because the lens that these decision making are seeing through is totally different than the lens that women see through. And of course, but I just wanted also to comment on what Nina, I always call you Nina, but I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's also a nice name I like. I think what we need is not, definitely is not a new resolution, is not a new document, is not a new condemnation to hear from the Secretary General or from any other mission. But in fact, what we need is really binding measures. And we need to emphasize on the accountability aspect. That's why I'm a big supporter of the compact, the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Compact, which Karama also is a board member of, and which also emphasize on the accountability aspect. It brings together stakeholders from different sectors, bring them together. And also it's like, it's not obligatory, of course, but it has the norm that brings these different stakeholders together, encourage them to devote resources and support to different actors at the different levels, especially civil society level, to devote the needed support in order for them to not only to maintain the momentum and to build on the momentum in order to change the lives of women and girls living in conflict context. So it's really important, the accountability, and also to have it as part of the social responsibility. I'm sure, like, the interest we've seen from different states, from different private sector companies, the biggest private sector companies in the world, big also academic institutions, bringing also civil society organizations, expanding this network and strengthening the linkages between these different sectors. It's, for me, unprecedented. We have been seeing different sectors working, each, like private sector, of course, they work out of their social responsibility, but not for the same interest, for the same goals that we are hearing now. They even themselves, we heard it many times in different platforms, especially during the Generation Equality Forum, saying that it's true, we have been overlooking gender issues in our businesses. And now we are more aware, and we are more considerate about the implications of our business and our work on gender issues. Now we are more sensitive, not only sensitive, we are responsive to gender issues. And this is exactly what we want. We need to see the change, the tangible change on ground. We need to see this as part of the norms of these different stakeholders. And I'm sure the mobilization of resources, it needs, of course, it's not enough to mobilize resources, because we need to ensure the effective way to use these resources and to distribute them to those actors who are really making real change on ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Amani. Hibak, I will respect the time. So I want just at the end to say that for me, I have nothing to add after Amani and Charlotte, but I want to say that I really believe in our power as women and in our persistence as a feminist movement, and the past experience have taught us this. And I think that the 16 days will be a great opportunity for us, as mentioned during the discussion, to raise more the voice on the issue that women's rights not only matter, but they are integral part of human rights. So thank you again, Hibak. It was a great pleasure being with you, Charlotte and Amani. And thanks for all of you who attended the session. Thank you again.